Hi. Well, you've done it. You have completed 500 days with NTI. Congratulations. So now we turn our attention to what's next. And that's really why our last weekend assignment was watching this video by Leo, which was about training. I think it was called something like, training is necessary for growth or something similar to that. In that video, Leo made some key points that I'd like to review. One, training. Sorry, my voice is going. All right, let's try that again. Training is practice. And so if we're going to train for awakening, then we need to practice. So the first thing I'd like to share with you is some recommended practices as you go forward beyond these 500 days with NTI. This is the training that I recommend. One thing that I recommend is getting a book called Thoughts of Awakening, 365 Thoughts for Contemplation. It says the author is Regina Dawn Akers, but these thoughts came to me when I was the student of the inner guide. There were 365 thoughts given to me for contemplation. And what I recommend that you do as a practice, this is not the theory, we'll get to the theory, but as a practice, is I recommend that you go ahead and purchase the book, Thoughts of Awakening, 365 Thoughts for Contemplation. In fact, let me show you that on Amazon. This is it. You can go and you can get it as a Kindle book, $4.99 to buy, or you can get the paperback. So I recommend that you go to Amazon and get the Thoughts of Awakening. And then here's how I recommend turning that into a practice. Each day there's a thought, and they're all fairly brief. A couple of them are a little longer, but they're all fairly brief. Start your day off by contemplating that thought. Ask, what does this thought mean for me? Or ask, how can I apply this thought to my life? Either of those questions. What does this thought mean to me? How can I apply this thought to my life? And see what arises as clarity. And write that clarity down, whatever comes. The reason you want to write it down is because if you don't write it down, there's a likelihood that you'll forget it later. And then throughout the day, when you have the opportunity, review both the thought of awakening for the day and your clarity. And whatever guidance is in your clarity, whatever this thought meant for you, or however you could apply this thought to your life, start practicing that guidance. So we're using the thoughts of awakening as a means of getting you in touch with your own inner wisdom. So that's the purpose of that particular practice. And as you can see, it says 365 thoughts, which means if you do a thought a day, you'll go through it in a year. But sometimes you might want to hang out with a thought more than a day. And so don't feel like you have to go through it in a year. Trust yourself. But when you feel like you are complete with a thought and it's time to move on to the next thought, do that, regardless of whether you only spent a day with that thought or a few days or several days. The second practice that I recommend is continuing meditation. We have several choices now, several choices that you learned through 500 days with NTI. You could practice self-inquiry, practice noticing what is looking, noticing what I am. You could practice the loving consciousness meditation with those guided audios, and I'll show you how to find them in a moment. You could practice the awareness, watching awareness meditation with those guided audios. Or you could practice the open-eyed meditation that we learned earlier in the 500 days from Ellie Rusdar, where you look at something, but instead of focusing on the something you're looking at, you focus on the awareness that's aware. Or you could focus on being, all right? You can do this with eyes open or eyes closed, and you just focus on that sense of existing, that sense of here-ness, or some call it the sense of I am, amness, right? Or you could practice the do nothing meditation. Just let everything be as it is in a very deep way, and you just sit and be the spaciousness within which all of this is happening. Or you could, bounce around, do one meditation for a while, then shift to another meditation. All of these meditations are helpful. And let me show you on the Awakening Together website where you can go and find the loving consciousness and awareness, watching awareness audios. This is awakening-together.org. And this website changes from time to time. So if it changes, just look to see where they may have moved it. It should still make some intuitive sense. But right now, underneath AT audios, you'll see meditation audios. And both the loving consciousness and the awareness, watching awareness, are Michael Langford methods. So if you go to the Michael Langford methods, you'll find all three of his methods: awareness, watching awareness, abandon, release, which you could try if you would like to, and loving consciousness. And when you click on one of those, you will come to the audios that you were listening to during the 500 days. So that's how you find those if you would like to go back and practice those audios again. The third thing that I recommend is something new. It's called Regina's Awakening Games. These are games that I played for years in the awakening process when I was not sitting in meditation, but I wanted to practice noticing awareness and focusing on awareness while I was out moving around in the day. I created these different games that would allow me to do that. Let me show you where you're going to be able to find these games on the Awakening Together website. If you go to what's called Regina's audios, you'll notice all of my audios are stored here. And if you go down the Regina's audios menu, you'll get to Regina's Awakening Games. And this is where you'll be able to find them. They're going to be posted right here. Notice it says coming soon. I'm going to start creating those now that I've finished this series of videos for the 500 days. I'm going to start making these videos, but by the time you get there, there will be some there for you. And eventually this page will be complete. So again, I recommend using the thoughts of awakening and meditation in your daily sitting practice, contemplation and meditation. Throughout the day, I'm going to recommend playing some of these games, Regina's Awakening Games. And in fact, you might watch one video a week and practice a game all week, and then go to the next video and practice it all week. Another practice I'm going to recommend when you're up and about walking around is that loving all method that you've already been introduced to. So you have two practices for your sitting time during the day, contemplation and meditation, and two practices for your out and about time during the day, your walkabout exercises, right? The Awakening Games and the Loving All method. So that's the training for awakening that I'm recommending beyond the 500 days. Now, of course, another thing that Leo said is that the training is the most important, but the training is supported by theory. So I do have some theory that I am recommending First of all, I have some books and a video playlist. Now, some of these books I've already recommended, so maybe you've already read them. Maybe you want to go back to them. Maybe you don't if you've already read them. That's okay. These are recommended. The first one, of course, is The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. The second one is The Teachings of Inner Ramana by Regina Dawn Akers. And that is the book that was given to me, the messages that were given to me sometime after I finished scribing NTI. Another is Discovery of the Presence of God, Devotional Non-Duality by Dr. David Hawkins. The Transparency of Things by Rupert Spira. The Path to Know Self, Life at the Center by Bernadette Roberts. This is the book I was recommending as we were going through Revelation, NTI Revelation. And then The Direct Means to Eternal Bliss by Michael Langford. This is where you're going to find like the loving all method documented so that you can review it as you need to. You're going to find awareness, watching awareness documented so you can review it as you need to. You'll find other things in that book as well. Now, Michael, meditation was his key path. So you'll find he recommends meditating 2 to 12 hours per day. Don't feel that you need to take on that guidance if that isn't what's right for you. But his descriptions, his teachings about the ego, his teachings about what he calls the extreme desire for liberation, which I call the spiritual aspiration or the true desire. His teachings about the loving all method, watching awareness, these things are perfect. So it's a very important part of my recommended reading list. And tomorrow there will be one more post that will come out and it will have this recommended reading list on it. I'll also put these practices on it so you'll have it documented, not just in video. And then I also recommend a playlist. It's the RDA, which is Regina Dawn Akers Early Teachings Playlist. And that, of course, is available in YouTube on the Awakening Together channel. You can also get to it from the Awakening Together website. When you're at the website, if you just go again underneath Regina's audios, you'll find where it says Early Teachings and Classics. And when you click on that, snippets from the early teachings on YouTube, that's what you're looking for. Snippets from the early teachings on YouTube. And clicking on that will take you directly to the YouTube playlist. And if you look at these audios, first of all, there's quite a bit. I'm still building this. Right now, there's 137 videos. But notice they're short. You know, this one's a little under 10 minutes, 8.5 minutes, 5.5 minutes. This one's a little longer, 16, but then 7, 13, 11, 6, 5.5. Here's a longer one, 24.5. That's about as long as they get, right? So it's going to be very easy for you to go through and listen to maybe 2 or 3 of these a week. You know, before we had the practice of doing the weekend assignments. Sometimes it was a Leo video. Sometimes it was a Regina Dawn Akers teaching. Maybe you can replace the weekend assignment by going in and listening to 2 or 3 of these early teachings. I think you'll find they'll be very supportive to you as you move forward. And again, tomorrow, one more post will come out, the last post for the 500 days, which will provide all of this information to you. I'm also going to contemplate if I want to add anything to that reading list before I post that. So if you see 1 or 2 books added, know that they came up to me in the time between making this video and making that post. So we've got our practice, we've got our theory. The next thing Leo talked about was vision. This again is something that we've emphasized from the beginning of the 500 days, having a spiritual aspiration. You know, knowing what I want, what's most important to me, and being able to ask, What do I truly want? We saw this was important all the way through the end of NTI Revelation, which means all the way to the point of awakening. We need to be able to have a vision or a spiritual aspiration or a true desire that would keep propelling us forward and help us to walk right by distractions, fears, lesser desires. And again, if you read that Michael Langford book, The Most Direct Means to Eternal Bliss, or there's also a version out called The Direct Means to Eternal Bliss, either one will work. If you read that Michael Langford book, he has a couple of chapters on just how important this desire is. Great book to read. And then the fourth component was discipline, right? You have to be able to stick to your practice, your theory, and the love of your vision. So I want to read something to you. I can't remember if I've read this before or not during the 500 days. So if it's a review, it's a review. If it's new, it's new. But it's from the Teachings of Inner Ramana, which is one of the books on the reading list. It's called The Love of Discipline. All right, so listen to this. Today, I will talk about discipline. Discipline is a dirty word to the mind. It screams lack of freedom, control, and extends ideas of being forced to do things you do not really want to do. But I ask you to look at the idea of discipline again and ask, who is the I that has these? Sorry. Who is the I that has these ideas? Who is the I that feels beaten down by the idea of discipline? So we're using a bit of self-inquiry here to do some looking at these ideas that I don't like discipline. Right now, it is as if two eyes live within you. It is time we begin to look at these two eyes now. One eye is the false thought, the false idea of who you are, the thinking. The other eye is best described now as your true heart, or we could call that the call to awakening. One reason for learning the difference between these two eyes is so you can learn to distinguish the difference between the eye that speaks for what you want. What do I truly want? And the eye that sounds like you, but in truth, it is an imposter. It's just thought. Let's look again at the idea of discipline. I have told you that discipline means consistency, right? Consistency of spiritual practice. You know that you want the consistent experience of God without end and without distraction. And you also know that consistent practice brings this experience. So you see, you love it. You are grateful for it. You want with your whole heart to embrace discipline. It is the false I that wants to throw this idea away. It is the false I that resists and tells you that you hate discipline. This is why it is helpful to question the false I thought that poses as you. This thought is literally an obstacle to the experience of the true self. This false identification is everything that stands in the way of you knowing you. And if you continue to listen to it and continue to believe it, as if its statements are your thoughts, then you continue to miss out on the experience of your truth. The I thought must be questioned, and it must be seen that this thought isn't you. Let's talk about the love of discipline. Discipline is like a roadway lined with beautiful flowers and trees and green pastures to a destination that is literally more beautiful than your imagination. Who wouldn't want to take this road and, as they travel, embrace every moment of this beautiful and amazing journey? This is discipline. It is consistently applying your devotion. It is lovingly loving your love. It is giving yourself exactly what you want. Questioning the I thought that disagrees with discipline is like checking the map to make sure you don't leave this lovely road for a dry and dusty and bumpy one that heads off into the desert away from the lusciousness of your love. Follow your heart is more than just a saying. When you can hear your true heart calling, following your heart is literally following a beacon home. And it will lead you there straight away if you remember that the beacon and the true I are one. In other words, it is your true self that is calling you back to it, back to the realization of what you are. So whenever you listen to that true desire, that spiritual aspiration, it's that calling from the true self, calling you home. And so the discipline, right? Sticking with these practices, daily contemplation and meditation, focusing on awareness as you can throughout the day through the awakening games, and practicing the loving all method. This is what you want. You want to do this regularly. You don't want to forget. You want to walk this lovely road lined with trees and flowers and green pastures to a destination that is literally more beautiful than your mind can imagine. So those were Leo's points. You need the training. He said, I think, for the growth. For us, it's for the awakening. The practice is what's most important, but it is supported by theory. You need a vision to propel you forward, and you need the discipline to stick with it. So as you finish these 500 days with NTI, please continue. That's all that I have to share. It's been wonderful spending this time with you. Goodbye.